All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us. I want to continue admitting people. My name is Nate Hosell. I'm a project manager for the Department of City Planning. I'm managing the city's current comprehensive development plan update. We felt that this training was a good opportunity to present the comp plan, the process, as well as go through some of the online and in-person exercises that you and your neighbors will be seeing during the community open house phase of the public process, which is currently going on right now, and it will last through mid next month. And again, thank you all for joining us. Again, if you just joined us, please drop your name in the chat, as well which neighborhood and MPU you represent. So I want to share my screen and we'll start. Again, thank you all for coming to our PlanA Ambassador training. I am just not super good on I'm trying to see everyone. I can't see everyone. So today's agenda is introducing you real quick to our project team and our public leadership group. Also give you an overview of the comprehensive development plans the city has. And then Aaron Fortner and I will go over the Improving Atlanta's land use approach, which is our big work right now with the public over the next several months, as well as give you all a sense of what's going on in our open houses, as well as online tools. So we'll provide a little training on that. And then I'll come back and talk a little bit more about our community involvement process and what to expect over the next couple months. And then just highlight what we are calling PlanA ambassadors, which are now you, neighborhood ambassadors, as well as Department of City Planning staff from other departments, staff from other departments, as well as our implementing partners. These are the people in orange shirts or orange lanyards at our community open houses and public meetings and pop-ups. These are people that are really out there to help us engage with the neighborhoods beyond just the small staff that we have in our planning studio in the Department of City Planning. And then we'll open up plenty of time for Q&A as well as further discussion. Again, I'm Nate Hosell, the project manager for the Comprehensive Development Plan. With me is Catherine Hernandez. She works with me. She's our co-project manager. We have a lot of people also in our department that are working as part of the team, including our commissioner and deputy commissioner. I work in the Office of Design, so I work with Doug Young, the director of Office of Design, as well as Monique Forte, our assistant director in the planning studio. We also have a lot of work with our marketing and communications team, with Marcy leading that group. And then we have Caleb and Aaron. These are our consultants, our main contacts for our consultant team with TSW, the lead. So I just want to quickly introduce them. And then also we do have a public leadership group or an advisory group. This traditionally has been chaired by the CDHS chair of the given year of the comp plan update. And that's Jason Winston right now, Councilmember Winston. And we have various departments and partner agencies as part of that leadership group here on the screen. So I am going to quickly pause and make sure, again, I am not the best at Zoom, and I'm trying to do this on my own. I am going to stop sharing real quick just so I can see if there's anyone else in the waiting room. So it looks like I got a few people in the waiting room. Okay. Catherine, I'm going to try to make you a co-host. If you can keep an eye out on that, and also try to help with Aaron to get on. All right, well, sorry, everybody. Let me start back again. So can everyone still see my slides okay? Great. So the Comprehensive Development Plan is the local government's official policy for future physical growth and development. We're required to update this policy document every 5 years. It's required by the state. It's also required in our charter in the code, the city's code, to update that plan. So this is our 5-year update. We adopted what we called PlanA, the Comprehensive Development Plan, PlanA, back in October of 2021. Many of you may have participated in that process. It was during COVID. We had virtual meetings, nothing like we're doing right now with all the community meetings we're having and pop-ups. But we did the update. and now we're updating it now pretty much a year or two in advance. We intend to update this plan by next year, sometime next year. So we are a little bit ahead, but we have a great public leadership group guiding us. We're really we're really trying to do an inclusive public participation process. And we're updating the various chapters or elements of the comp plan over 1 or 2 phases over the next couple of months. The comprehensive development plan has 10 planning chapters or planning elements. These you can see on the screen. The first 2, land use and neighborhood planning, are the first 2 chapters that we're focusing right now our public process on. The other chapters, we're going to work on those later in the year, like starting late summer and into the fall, with, again, the idea of adopting the entire comprehensive development plan update sometime next year, mid-next year. The chapters are organized roughly the same. We have a vision statement, goals, needs and opportunities, as well as various policy statements and policy actions. And again, we just started this planning process, updating the chapters. We had a kickoff February 29th. And now we have our first week of community open houses under our belt, and we have about 3 or 4 more weeks of those open houses. We are focusing again on 2 chapters right now. Again, any comments or any feedback we get for the other chapters, we're keeping, but we won't be updating or revising any of those chapters until later this year. But the land use planning chapter is really the bulk. If you are an MPU person or a neighborhood person, this is the chapter that you all probably reference a lot when you're making land use or zoning recommendations. So this chapter has our land use approach and policies, as well as that future land use map and a character area map. And it has that compatibility table, that has little shaded squares on it that has zoning on one side and the land use on the other, making sure that they're compatible when you make recommendations for zoning changes. The last chapter of the comprehensive plan is the neighborhood planning chapter. And that chapter really focuses on our MPU system, as well as our small area and neighborhood plans and the planning process. Every year or every 5 years, we summarize which small area plans or neighborhood plans have been adopted during the 5-year cycle, but also talks about just our small area planning process in general. It also references an appendix, Appendix 3, I believe. That appendix has, if you're familiar with your NPU bodies, you all have NPU policies. These are brief statements about growth and development as they relate to various chapters in the comprehensive development plan. So that neighborhood planning chapter references that appendix. The comprehensive development plan is a policy. Atlanta city design is a vision. It's an aspiration. It has been adopted since 2017 in our charter. It's a great document in terms of visualization, talking about great things moving on to the next generation or two with growth and conservation area maps, with the 5 values of equity, accessibility, nature, progress, and ambition. Things that we fall back as planners, we fall back on when we need to make a decision regarding the comprehensive development plan. The comprehensive development plan is not the zoning ordinance. The comprehensive development plan is the policy that guides the implementation or the administration of that legal document, the zoning ordinance. The maps in the comprehensive plan is not the zoning maps. So I just want to clarify that the comprehensive development plan is a policy. The zoning ordinance implements that policy. So you can think of the comprehensive plan or Plan A sitting in between Atlanta city design as a vision document and the zoning ordinance as an implementing tool. There's a whole bunch of other implementing tools like our financial programs with Invest Atlanta, our building permits and other programs that just are regulations that implement the vision and the policy. All these things work together to change the physical environment of the city of Atlanta. We've been doing comprehensive planning for a very long time in the city of Atlanta. Actually, this is like the 50th year. We're celebrating NPU 50. The NPU system and the comprehensive development plan as we know it today are so tightly tied together that it makes sense when you think about the history of comprehensive planning My predecessors in 1974 had this new NPU system, and they were working with neighbors like you, creating a updated comprehensive development plan, a plan that has only been written by previous county commissioners or county planners, not the city of Atlanta. And you can see some like big themes, when you kind of look at the previous decades of planning, where we had major programs like our impact fee program and the historic preservation program, major areas of investment like our downtown and around MARTA stations, as well as things like, more recently, the Beltline in 1993, 1992 being introduced in the comprehensive plan, and other things like that. The point here is that when you look back on these old comprehensive plans, there's little seeds of thoughts, ideas from the public that grow to big things that we see today, 20, 30 years later. So I just want to kind of emphasize that the comprehensive development plan is an important document to get public ideas into a policy that may take a few decades to implement, but it is interesting to see how the plan is implemented over the years. Now, many of you are familiar how people use the comprehensive development plan. Residents and business owners look at the comp plan when they need to make a decision about investing on a property. NPUs use it to make recommendations to us and council on various land use and zoning decisions. And local decision makers, including city council, they open the comp plan too. Now, this training, we'll get into pretty good details of the exercises that are in the open house as well as online. But I do want to emphasize that the commissioner and I did an NPU University class back in January, talking about Comp Plan 101, where we spent a lot more time talking about what is a comprehensive development plan and also highlighting the process that we're doing over the next 12 to 18 months. And that's on our website, atlantaforall.com. Now I'm going to go into what's the big picture. Why is this update so important for us? Again, I mentioned Atlanta City Design in 2017. So yes, we did an update in 2021. It was a very minor update in terms of engagement and things that were changing. We feel like this is now the first time we can actually reflect Atlanta City Design as a framing document in the public process of updating the comprehensive plan. It's also important to consider that Caleb and Aaron and the TSW team have been working with our Office of Zoning and Development since 2016, looking at updating or rewriting our zoning ordinance. It was, since 1982, we've been living with that zoning ordinance. So it's a very important update right now to support that new zoning tool when it comes online in a year or two. So the big point here for our current work, updating that land use chapter, is that when you do look at the land use chapter, there are two groups of policies, maps and policies. There's the character area map and policies, and then there's the future land use map and descriptions of those various designations. We are working on combining the best of both character areas and future land use into one category. We've been working with 2 levels of maps and 2 levels of policies since 2011. The future land use designations were introduced in the 70s and 80s. Again, I mentioned, we're rewriting the old zoning code. We need to think more fresh thoughts about what's in our land use chapter in the comprehensive plan. So we're combining character areas and future land use into what we're calling development patterns. We are not touching Atlanta City Design in those growth and conservation areas, those growth and conservation maps. We are updating the land use chapter by proposing to combine the best of character areas and future land use into one set of maps and one set of policies called development patterns. And so when you come to our open houses, you'll see a board like this, kind of giving an overview of what you're all about to participate in. And again, we are trying to improve the land use approach by majorly overhauling what's in the land use chapter, combining character areas and future land use into development patterns. We're doing this, again, because I mentioned we got a new zoning ordinance that needs a policy that can guide that implementation in the future. And we have Atlanta City Design sitting there as a framing document that provides more clear direction on where we should be going over the next generation or two. So these development patterns are one way to improve that land use approach, given those new things going on. Now, zoning 2.0 is what we're calling our zoning rewrite program, our initiative. Again, PlanA is the comp plan, zoning 2.0 is the zoning ordinance rewrite. They have a good website, which has a recording of Caleb's presentations last year and the year before, workshops and presentations over big ideas. There's also the slide decks, as well as a very interesting collection of pattern analysis looking at various perspectives of our zoning ordinance and the built environment across the city. So take a look at that on the website. Now, the intention, and when we're done with our meetings over the next few months, there will be a development pattern, new development pattern maps, new development pattern policies, and tools. So we're translating all the existing land use and character areas into development patterns. So those common tools like a compatibility table that you might be familiar with, there will be an equivalent compatibility table using development patterns. So we are, Caleb, me, Aaron, Catherine, we have meetings or calls almost every day. We are very well coordinated right now with where the zoning rewrite is and where Plan A public policy or public process is. We are just at the beginning of the public process for Plan A, and Caleb and his team are going to go back into the public limelight. I guess it's safe to say, Caleb, in May.
20th.
So we are just at the beginning of a 12 or 18-month journey, working together in the public process of both the zoning code rewrite and the Plan A update. So again, we just had our first few community open houses last week for Plan A. There's a whole bunch of other updates or big planning things going on that we are aware of as Department of City Planning. For instance, Atlanta DOT will be updating the Comprehensive Transportation Plan. That plan was adopted in 2018. We summarize it as a chapter in the transportation element of the comp plan. So we know that they're going to start that work later in the year. We also know that if you came to our public open houses this past week, our partners over at the Parks Department, they're working on a trails master plan for the entire city. So we know that that's going on. We know that every year we update to CIE, which is an actual chapter in the comprehensive plan. So we know there's a lot of things going on that we're aware of and that we are definitely sensitive to right now during the public process of updating the comp plan. So just a real quick brief overview before I start handing over things to Aaron. I get this question a lot. We are starting not from scratch. We are not starting from scratch. We are starting with the existing plans, or sorry, the existing maps and policies that are in the current comprehensive development plan. We are taking those as our base, as our starting point. When we're thinking about translating, when we're talking about translating character areas and future land use and development patterns, we are taking the existing character areas and the existing future land use maps and policies and translating them into their equivalent development patterns. We are also working behind the scenes and reviewing the past one decade, not multiple decades, one decade, past decade of small area plans that are adopted by city council and the mayor. We feel like this is an important time to look at those plans, see which land use recommendations were recommended, but never implemented for various reasons. And we'll make sure we highlight those on the map that we present to the public in May, where we would like your consideration. Like, do these recommendations still make sense for your neighborhood or NPU? If so, please let us know. This is our time to brush those plans off and to bring those back to the public to have a conversation during this plan update. And then all this feedback and input we're getting in the open house exercises, both in person and online, will be another piece of data that will tweak that translation of the maps and policies in the land use chapter. So existing, what we got today in the current Plan A, what we've adopted over the past decade in small area plans. Now, your neighborhoods and MPUs may be aware of plans that go back even further. I encourage you to all take a look at that if they're still relevant for your groups. But Catherine and I are not reviewing those plans past a decade old. So I mentioned, and I'll highlight the bigger community involvement and planning process after Aaron's done, because I want to get him started. We're going to have development pattern map policies and tools, as well as a draft of that land use and neighborhood planning chapter in May as part of our workshop series in May and June. So that's when you'll see the first draft. I encourage you all, especially if you're an NPU chair or NPU leader, to take a look at your the neighborhood planning chapter to get a sense of what goals and policy statements are in that chapter regarding the NPU system, as well as your NPU policies in the appendix, as I mentioned. There will be other drafts later in the year for these two chapters, and then obviously there'll be a draft or two for the other chapters as we go into the fall and early next year. In between these meetings, these open houses and workshops and meetings we'll have in the fall, me, Catherine, the other planners, we're in neighborhoods and pop-ups, we're in libraries. You'll see us out there. We are very much out there in the neighborhoods right now. So again, you'll see us. So when you come into an open house, if you haven't been to an open house, or if you open our survey online, we set the table, we set the context of growth in the city. Atlanta Regional Commission just published a revision to their forecast for 2050. And for Atlanta, they're forecasting 700,000 people be living in the city by 2050. That's about 170,000 more people than there are today. And that's about a need for 100,000 more housing units. So we want to kind of set that context that Atlanta is growing. It may not be growing as much as what was aspired in Atlanta city design. And by the way, Atlanta city design, the reason why we frame this in this way with the pie charts, Atlanta city design's number of 1.2 million is not a forecast. It's a projection. It's an aspiration. It's an aspiration of being 15% of the region's population. You know, we haven't been 15% of the region's population since we were a shrinking city in the 70s. We're at 8.5 right now. ARC's most recent forecast in February has us at 9%. So it's pretty weak when you kind of think about, you know, our share of the region population as the region grows. But it is what it is. I mean, this is the forecast that we're using. This is the context that we're planning in for our physical growth and development. So we have this as part of our setting the table on our survey, as well as in our open houses. And when you come into our open houses, you're greeted by a whole bunch of boards. These boards are presenting the proposed or draft development patterns. And I want to mention that we have maps next to them. These maps are organized by required study areas. Our code requires us to kind of work in study areas. And so we pulled from the 2011 groupings of study areas, you know, grouping 3 or 4 NPUs together. So we have 7 study areas. It's really for now the readability of the maps and putting stickers that are legible on the maps. So when you come into our open house, you see boards and you see a map. And we usually use the map that were in the study area on the table or taped next to the boards. If you want to talk about other parts of the city, you know, say we're in, I live in Midtown, so say we're in Midtown for our meeting. If you want to talk about somewhere like in Southwest Atlanta or up in Buckhead, those maps are somewhere else in the room with ambassadors to help you facilitate the exercise. So we got boards and maps in these open houses right now, introducing you to the development patterns and getting local perspective or local knowledge of where those development patterns currently exist, and we should keep them the way it is, or they don't exist, we should introduce them in this area. And so I want to introduce Aaron then, or hand this over to Aaron to kind of go through the exercise. His training will be relevant for both the in-person and the online. And our hope is that this training would also encourage you or give you the sense of confidence to perhaps relay your insights or training to your NPU or neighborhood groups or your neighbors, just so they feel comfortable and empowered to come to our meetings, to go online and use the exercises, or give me and Catherine an email and just ask for a chat about what's going on and how can I participate. So Aaron,
Yeah,
feel
great.
free to take
Thanks.
it. Do you want me to drop my screen and do you want to share yours, or do you want me to kind of click around?
If you don't mind driving the screen, that would
Okay.
be great. Okay, so Nate did a great job of teeing all this up. And so these are the development patterns that we are proposing. As Nate said, this is a merger of character areas and land use designations that are in the comp plan today. And this is our starting point in the conversation with the community. One of the things that we believe we'll get feedback on is even the categories we're proposing themselves. And so that'll be a great part of this first round of input. But we are basically proposing to merge these categories together and allow us to still keep the best of both, describing character, but also describing land use. As Nate said, this will work in support between Atlanta city design and the Atlanta zoning. This really stands in the middle as the conduit between those two things, and will still function that way, just like land use and character areas do today. And as he said, we really want to hear from people in this first round. Where do people want to see these development patterns? If they think that that's the way it is today, where do they want to keep it? And where would they like to propose that this be in places that maybe these patterns are not the way it is today in a certain area, but it would be aspirational. Someone may feel like they would like to see a certain one of these development patterns in a certain area in the future. So I'm going to quickly just touch on what these categories are, and then we'll spend time showing you specifically the land use mapping tool that we have on the website that will facilitate this exercise. So we have single family categories of development patterns. And the main thing to point out to you today in the comp plan, the land use designations have one category for single family. And so if you are R1 or R2 or R3, which are very large lot sorts of areas of the city that are kind of more typically on the outer fringes of the city, they were developed later in time. Those are single family land use today. And if you're an R4 neighborhood, which could be most of our in-town older neighborhoods with smaller lot sizes than R1, R2, R3. That is also designated as single family land use. So the innovation or the proposed change we're proposing here is to have two single family categories instead of one. And these categories will be what we're calling large lot single family and then medium lot single family. And as a frame of reference, this will make sense for people who are more familiar with zoning terms. But for a frame of reference, we think that R1, R2, and R3 areas of the city that are zoned R1, R2, R3, that those are good candidates for a large lot single family development pattern. And parcels and areas that are zoned R4 would be good candidates for medium lot single family development pattern. One thing to keep in mind is that at this point in the process, we do not want to introduce to the community any sort of like dimensions or calculations that people have to understand to be able to engage in the process. And so this is why we're describing it more simply right now as if you are familiar with zoning and you're engaging in this process and you're familiar with that, think about large lot as R1, R2, R3, and then the medium lot is R4. But for the a lot of our community who is not up to speed with zoning and not as engaged, we want them to participate too, and for them to more simply understand really from these pictures and the boards and the website we have that shows some of these areas, that large lot really is sort of more what you might call an estate lot, that could be a very the larger lots of our city for neighborhoods, and then the medium lot is really for the in-town, more historic neighborhoods of our city. But otherwise, we're not yet assigning dimensions to these things. Yeah, so that's kind of a description of those two. And again, we think this is a welcome improvement and innovation from the current approach, which just lumps all of these types of districts into one category that's called single family land use. We can go to the next slide. We are then proposing a category that's called residential, which is very familiar to people who know our current land use designations. We do have residential categories for multifamily uses, and so we're proposing to retain that and keeping these categories as residential. We currently have low density residential, medium density residential, high density residential, and very high density residential. So we have 4 categories. We're proposing to streamline this approach into 3 categories of low, medium, and high. And so we are proposing to take the medium and high categories and to merge them into a new just medium category. And then what we would refer to today as very high, that those would become called high density residential development patterns. As is the case today, we anticipate that multifamily development patterns, residential development patterns, would still enable for a very small percent of and a small presence of non-residential uses that would be limited and on a ground floor. This is exactly how things are done today, and we would want to retain that to allow just a little bit of non-residential. It doesn't mean that it always happens, but it does. Currently, we do allow that in our multifamily districts on the zoning side, and so we would anticipate these patterns would continue to enable a very, very small, limited type of non-residential within these development patterns. We do, as part of this process, we want to scrutinize the location of high density residential patterns. And the reason we want to scrutinize that is we believe that when you start getting very, very high densities of residential, that it's better for those to be located in areas that are mixed use, that are in parts of the city where they are very urban neighborhoods. They're very dense neighborhoods that should have a fuller range of retail options, civic options, office options. And so we think in general, the highest density residential areas of our city ought to typically be in mixed use districts, mixed use development patterns. But we know there's parts of the city today where that's not the case. We do have very high residential land use in our city today that are not in mixed use areas. But this is a question. This is a thing we want to encourage and challenge the community to consider this and to engage them to put their thinking caps on and think through, are there really areas of the city that should have very high residential and no other, truly not be mixed use? So that's the thing we are excited to hear from people as we engage in this part of the process. Okay, next slide. So we're introducing, this really is a new category that doesn't have a apples to apples category in today's comp plan and land use categories, called residential flex. And this picture on the right is before we get into the details of it, it gives a good snapshot of what we mean by this development pattern. We believe that there are some areas of the city today that operate in this way, where there are areas that have a truly a residential scale, and on the outside of the buildings even have predominantly residential character. But what's happening inside these buildings can be anything. It can be housing, it could be one home, it could be a duplex, it could be apartments, it could be retail, it could be office, it could be restaurants. But it's happening in a structure and in a character and scale that is a single family character and scale. So this is the category we're calling residential flex. As I said, this is really a new concept and intended for the areas that I described. We think there's a couple areas that could be interested in this. There could be small existing neighborhood commercial nodes. And when I say neighborhood commercial nodes, I don't mean areas of the city that have zoning called neighborhood commercial. There are areas of the city that truly have small neighborhood commercial, even though they may not have a zoning called neighborhood commercial. So there are small nodes that could be a candidate for this type of pattern. And then there are also many arterials and collectors in parts of the city that have residential, and over time these could become options for an area like that to begin to be pivoting away from being just residential and could start to become something else. So this is one we're really excited about the community learning about and starting to tell us, where do you see these in your area, if you do see them, or where might you want to see these in the future. And then we have mixed use categories. So this would be anything that would allow for any range of uses from residential to retail, office types of uses. This is very similar to the mixed use categories that we already have in the CDP. We have mixed use land use categories. And this would be intended to keep the mixed use categories we have today, but then also merge and sort of translate and transition our commercial land use categories into the mixed use category. For those of you who are familiar with that, we do have today in our CDP commercial land use categories and mixed use categories. We want to merge those two. Commercial categories already allow mixed use, and so does mixed use. So the proposal here is to turn those all into now one category called mixed use. There currently is a low, medium, and high density mixed use categories in the CDP. And there's also a general category in the CDP of a land use category that's called just mixed use without any designation of density, low, medium, or high. We're proposing to not have the general category and to have a low, medium, and high distinction for mixed use categories. As we look to translate and transition any properties in the city that are today only a general mixed use category, we would be informed by what the underlying zoning is. And that zoning category would start to tell us as the planners who are trying to translate these things into whether it should be low, medium, or high. As Nate said in the beginning, we're also though going to be looking for what have your small area plans said about certain parcels that may have general mixed use categories, and also obviously we'll be looking to hear from you all through this process as well that could inform that. And so then we have a final sort of other categories that are sort of don't match up with the pattern of single family residential or mixed use. These categories are industrial flex, community, and open space. Properties that are currently industrial would still retain an industrial, we think would retain an industrial category. Properties that are industrial mixed use today in the land use category would become industrial flex. Properties that are today designated as open space or private open space would now become a new just an open space development pattern. And then properties that are community facilities, transportation, communications, and utilities would turn into the community development pattern. There are a few other, for those of you who are in the know of our land use designations, we do have a few other current designations of in the CDP today. Business park, office institutional residential. We think these would, site by site, we would analyze each of these designations wherever they exist, which there's not as many of these in the city, but we would look to translate those into either, in some cases, that could be a good candidate for residential flex, or one of the mixed use development patterns. So now this is where you all come in. So we have designed this process to be as easy as possible for people to participate without having a PhD in CDPs and zoning, and people who do not know what acronyms are, which I understand. I'm sure most of you on this call know a lot about land use and zoning, and that's why you're on the call, because you're engaged. But we really want this process to be easy for the people who are not typically engaged and who do not know all the things. And so we really want through this process, to empower you to be the one who can pass the word on and be really an extension of this process to engage your neighbors, your fellow leadership teams, your block captains, your coffee group, your cycling group, and all the ways that we meet in community together. Really want this to be a thing that's easy to talk about and easy to tell others that, hey, there's a very simple way for you to engage and participate in the process. So there's two real ways that this can be done. One is for people to do it the old-fashioned way and come to a meeting. And so we're going to try to make that as easy as possible by having these spread out all over the city over several weeks. And anyone can go to any meeting. They don't have to live in a particular area to go to a meeting. And so, by doing as many as we're doing in all the locations we're doing, hopefully that'll make it easy. We're also making these meetings easy in that you will not have to come and sit for 2 hours and listen to me talk or Nate talk or anybody talk. These are open house style, and someone who comes in and knows exactly what they want to say and only wants to be in there for 15 minutes, they will be able to do that. And someone who wants to come in and spend the whole night there can do that as well. So we're making these an easy way to come and be at a meeting. But then we're also designing the website to facilitate the same interaction that you would be able to participate in the room at a meeting. And we know this, and you all know this, that if we only limited our input to the number of people who can come to a meeting, we're not going to really hear from everybody. So the website is a really great tool for probably many of your neighbors and many of the people in your neighborhood to be able to participate. And so we want, and we've designed the website with that in mind. As we move forward, the next round of our workshops, the next round of our workshops will build on what we hear now. So when you all come back to the next round of meetings, it'll be building off of what we're hearing right now. And we're also going to take these development pattern categories, which right now you're only seeing the categories, and you're going to tell us, I think this could go here. I think I would want to see this here. But at the next round of meetings, you're all going to see us tell you, here's what we've heard from you all, and here's what your adopted plan said, and here's what we're proposing, and how the whole city would translate every parcel into these new categories. So that's what's coming in the next round. Okay, we can move to the next slide. So here's how we've structured the website. We have a survey tool on the website that has 3 components to it. The first and the second components are really questions that are very simple questions, they're very basic questions. Some of them are multiple choice, some of them are fill in the blank. But people can take their time and they can do the citywide survey and tell us what they think about the future of the city. And then we move on to a category of, now tell us about your neighborhood, because we do want people to have the opportunity to tell us what kind of city do you want to live in, And then what do you think should happen for the future of your neighborhood? So we've broken them up that way, but these are very simple. These are really just a limited number of questions, and these are very easy for anybody to participate in. You don't have to know everything about zoning or comp plans to be able to engage in those two surveys. And then the third survey is the mapping part of the survey. And that's the one that really will be similar to what's happening in the room at the meeting, the open houses, where people will have maps with stickies with dots and putting things on maps. And in just a minute, I'll walk through that with you all so you can see it tonight. Just a few quick things to note on the survey for everybody. We are asking optional demographic questions. Please know for yourself and others that you might talk to, these questions are really just to help us know as we can report back on who we're hearing from, so we can feel confident that we're hearing from a diversity of people in our city. The demographic questions are not going to be, they're not questions that that we will report on or that we would be tracking over time. They're simply just there to know, help us guide who that we're hearing from, a broad representation of who Atlanta really is. And then the surveys will close on April 30th. And that'll give us time after April 30th to then shift gears into getting ready for the second round, to be able to know what you have all told us up to that point, and then we can get ready for our second round of showing you with maps what it is that we've heard from everybody. And then we will have new surveys that will guide the next round of the process. This is probably a good place, Nate, for us to show. Oh yeah, perfect. So this is the third survey that I was describing. So the third survey is map-based, and this will be a chance for you and your neighborhood to go onto a map and zoom in on any spot on a map and show us where you think a certain development pattern should go, to either preserve a pattern that's there today or to introduce a change for an area that you think should be that development pattern in the future. Nate, I'd like to do it sort of quickly live. Could we let me share and then I could do that? Okay, let's see here. So the point for tonight is for you all to be comfortable with this tool and to see it in, for a few minutes in action. And again, our hope is that you all would feel comfortable after tonight being able to do this again with your neighbors. Again, maybe this is something you do with an MPU leadership team. Maybe you do it with a neighborhood civic association leadership team. Maybe you do it with block captains. Maybe there's a wine and cheese party on a Friday night and people take 10 minutes and do it before the party. We want to just empower you all to socialize this in your neighborhood and to be able to say, I did it, I know how to do it, it's not that hard. And you can help people in your neighborhood go to this website, because if everyone can feel comfortable doing it, we're going to get a lot of engagement and a lot of responses, and the more people we hear from, the better. So let me share my screen. Okay, here we go. Okay, so everybody seeing that? Yeah, okay. Okay, so again, there were 3 parts of the survey. There was a citywide question part, there was a neighborhood survey part, and those are all questions and answers and multiple choice. This is a map base, is the third part of the survey. And here is just a brief description about the process, and reminding a little reminder here that we are expected to grow by approximately 170,000 people and 100,000 new units. And then you enter into the survey. So a little description here about what are development patterns. It's just a bit of a intro to it for the user to understand what a development pattern is. And this again is the same information that we're presenting in the room at our open houses during this process. So then we take you right to all the categories that we just talked through. And again, all of these categories are in the room at the open houses as well. And so the survey participant has the option here to click on any development pattern that they would like to. Or you could say, I just want to go to the end of the survey and provide general comments. I think there are going to be people who they just have something to say and they don't want to have to put a pin on a map. They've just got to say what they want to say. And so we have given them a way to do that. So anyone in your community that wants to do that can do that. Again, keep in mind too, we have the other two parts of the surveys here. We are asking people lots of questions through those other surveys. So there is an abundant ways here to tell us what you think. So this, what you're seeing here is not the only option for people to write their comments down. But we do want to help have people tell us more precisely where they see these development patterns being. And so this is designed to do that. So if I click on large lot single family, and that's the one that I want to play with right now, then I would click next, and it would take me to a page that tells me a little bit more about large lot single family. And it says here a little bit of a description, and says that these are areas of the city that are not quite urban and not quite rural. They typically have larger block sizes, larger residential lots. They lack sidewalks and are often distant from transit, retail, employment districts. They have generous yards and intervening floodplains. And so there's a little bit of a description here for every single development pattern. We're also providing for the participant here an option to see what are examples of this development pattern. So large lot single family development patterns, you could see a little bit of what that might look like. And you can see the description we gave is true, that these are larger lot, these are single family, and here's a photo that sort of communicates that. So that's a way to see examples. We've also provided some more detail on not just the place type, but also the buildings you might see in that development pattern. So here we're saying that these are the kinds of buildings in a large lot single family development pattern. Detached houses, and again, these are photos that represent a large lot. Guest houses, because that's a thing that's allowed currently in R1, R2, and R3. So every development pattern has this same format. You can see examples of that pattern from like a macro lens, and then you can see the building types that are typically within that development pattern. There's some basic instructions that help people understand what they're expected to do here. Click on one of the colorful buttons, place your cursor on the map, click to place a pin, give more details about your answer in a pop-up window. And then here's some information on the legend that just is telling us that these are Atlanta City Design conservation and growth areas. And so then you would click on one of these two. You would be able to zoom in. The NPUs are listed here. The neighborhood names are listed here. And so if I was in Washington Park, I could zoom in to my neighborhood. I can look for street indicators that tell me where I am. And then I can click on either, this is a pattern that exists today and I want to keep it. So this would be that. And then I can say why I feel that way if I want to. And I can click on, here's an area where that pattern does not exist, but I would like for that to exist. And I can place that pin on it. And I could say why if I wanted to. And so this is really the format of every single development pattern. And you would be able to do this for every single pattern. Any of these that somebody wanted to do that with, they would be able to do that. And again, for the person who only wants to skip to the end and just say a comment, they can do that as well. Okay, we go back to the presentation. Okay, and so Nate, I think you'll drive us from here and then we'll get to
do you want
Q&A.
to take any questions about the survey tool at this point? I think it's like a natural break because if people have to go and asked our questions about the
Great.
survey, because the rest of it's just kind of big picture community involvement
Yeah.
process and deeming you all as neighborhood Plan A ambassadors.
That's great.
So are there any questions about the survey tool, the mapping tool in particular? Go ahead, Tamara. I see your hand raised.
Thank you. I'm just having a really hard time. My phone's cracked, so I can't put anything in the chat. But so in addition to preserve or change, if we can consider possibly some other nuances, things like create and or connect. I mean, connect is a big one. But I really appreciate the effort y'all have gone to for these the survey tool. My next question, and I heard some mention of, the school board. What is the involvement of Atlanta Public Schools with this effort?
Yeah, so right now they're really helping us with public engagement. We're looking at facilities that could host 100 people or more for these workshops. So that's one. When we start getting into the other chapters regarding community development, economic development, things of that nature, we work with APS to review our policies, to figure out any existing revisions to the existing policies. In terms of like their land use planning or surplus properties, they handle that on their own comprehensive planning effort, not the citywide comprehensive planning effort. There's some connectivity with our implementing chapters, our community work program in particular. But if you are thinking about or just kind of contemplating APS's engagement or providing recommendations for reuse of properties, I typically don't see that in the comprehensive planning process. At least I haven't seen it looking at historical comprehensive plans, as well as my own involvement over the decade or so with the city. So hopefully that answers your question on that.
Yes, I think you did. I think, it's not as much of them having an impact on what you're doing as opposed to what this effort is going to have an impact on their downstream ramifications, on, students, coming into the system. But
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Zach, good to see you.
Hello. So I went through the tool just real quick. I have a couple questions. One is, will individual users be able to see the feedback that other users leave, just to sort of get a sense of what the community as a whole might be saying about a given area? And then two, is there a way, I didn't see a way to leave feedback for if a person may not know what they want to see in an area, but they know that the existing land use or the existing sort of development pattern is not what they want to continue to see? Is there a way to leave a marker that says sort of like anything but what is currently there, if that makes sense?
Yeah, well, the first question, we did contemplate, do we allow people to see other people's comments? We felt like the map would just get super busy. The TSW team saw that perspective when we use social pinpoint during the zoning code rewrite. I've seen it with like Atlanta DOT when they did their Vision Zero social pinpoint, a very similar type of program. It got really, really messy. And we're documenting well over 40, 60 dots right now in the past 3 community open house meetings on each of those development pattern maps. So we're accumulating a lot of data points. I just think it would look way too busy. So we decided not to show that. And we'll figure out, we'll have a way of showing the accumulative dots as we introduce drafts over the next several months. In terms of your other question, we do that in the in-person meetings, post-it notes, or we even have white dots where our facilitators make a notation on the dot or the post-it note, and there's more in their notes that they relay back to me and Catherine. I don't know, Caleb, Aaron, if we would want to introduce that to the online mapping tool. But what are your suggestions?
I mean, one thing I was going to say though is that's that really the first survey and the second survey. We are really, especially the second survey, we are asking people questions about your neighborhood that is much more not so parcel specific. I mean, we kind of wanted the map option for the person who wanted to get down to the map level, but I would encourage you to look at the neighborhood survey because it really is, I think, getting to what you're asking. It lets people tell us what kind of neighborhood do you want, what kinds of changes might you want to see in your neighborhood based on, you know, are you close to transit or are you close to retail or office, or are there other housing options you'd like to see in your neighborhood? So I think that survey does let us start to get at what you're, the kind of person that you're describing, or the kind of question you're describing.
Donald, hi, welcome. What's your question or comment?
Hey, yeah, again, great, phenomenal tool, just amazing. But my question is there any draft assignment of development patterns to the city? Or are you kind of starting, you're looking for community input before you start doing that, or?
You may have missed the opening slides. We start from the existing future land use and character area map. We're combining future land use and character areas into development patterns.
Right,
we
but I
have
mean, in terms of,
existing.
sure, I know I got that part, but I mean, in terms of this tool, where do you, it doesn't show those, and there's two sets of those. There's development, I mean, there's character and land use designations.
Right.
So those don't show up on this
That's right.
map. So I mean, there's some linkage to what those designations are currently, right? There's going to
That's
be,
right.
and then some kind of transition. So if you want to sort of understand what's there now, you just on your own go back and reference those maps, and then
That's right. Yes, our preference, or like the in-person meetings, is to get local knowledge. Like, read the description. If you feel like the description is missing something categorically for that low density residential or medium density mixed use, let us know. Like, you know, we're taking input of making those descriptions better. The nomenclature, the photos, the topography of the typology of the map or the buildings, that's all comments and feedback that we would take. You know, we had some comments already on some of those pictures, but we don't want people to be hung up on what's currently a policy. And a future land use map and a character area is a policy. We don't want to get people hung up on that. If they want to your point, if they want to kind of look at what's currently the policy for this parcel, they are more than happy to open up our local GIS tool, you know, our planning viewer, and have that on one screen, and go use our Maptioneer, our online mapping tool survey on the other screen. They can do that, but we did not want to introduce that layer of sophistication, because not many people, the majority of the people that we engage may not have ever opened up that future land use map. So we didn't want to get people stuck on that, what's currently a policy. We want their local knowledge, their perspective, because that really helps us also understand that we're doing a pretty good job of describing what these development patterns are to a person who doesn't even know what future land use map is.
okay. And then do you have to register, or this is just available through the link on the city, the PlanA website?
The mapping tool?
Yeah.
Yeah, anyone can click on it. At the end, we just ask for your email, so we can get just documentation of who's taken it, and we can get back. You know, we can include you in our distribution list. We can get back with you if you have like an amazing comment that we want to quote, for instance. You know, we'll ask you. You know, but no, anyone can go on there and use it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep. Amy, hi.
Hi, that's me. I went to the open house at Bessie Branham last week,
Yes.
and maybe this is on me, but all the things you've been explaining tonight, I didn't realize that that's what I was supposed to be taking home from that session. So I'm glad I'm here tonight. And I don't know if this is a comment on me or the process or whatever, but I just thought I would throw that out there. And I also, when I was there, they did say, hey, we've got these 2 surveys we want you to take, the neighborhood one and the citywide one, but they didn't mention the mapping tool. I guess maybe it wasn't ready for prime time, or Anyhow, that was my feedback.
Thanks for coming to our open house.
Thank you.
Brad.
Hi there. Yeah, thanks for doing this. So one quick question is there a limit on the number of submissions? It sounds like there isn't. You know, we could go in there one day and share some feedback, and then we could go in another day and share some other feedback, and we'll just need to
Yeah,
put
we did not limit
some-
to an IP address or
Okay.
anything like that.
Okay.
And I don't, Aaron didn't kind of go through entirely because I'm using it as well. Like I'm taking all those dots and using the survey myself. So just one thing as a user of it, a heavy user this past week, you can click on like Aaron showed a demonstration with large lot, and he did his dots and provided a little description and went back, and you click another development pattern, and then you can do the same thing. If you go back to the large lot, you see your pins that you had pinned on the map. You have to go to the end. You have to click like, all right, you know, because it asks you like, do you wish to pin another development pattern? You like to talk about another development pattern? Yes. And it goes back to that screen where you can select. There's a point where you say no, hopefully, like you're done. Like I gave all my input. It does give you like another 2 or 3 screens to kind of close you out and submit. So you know you've submitted your feedback. So just want to kind of highlight that as a user. So when you submit one session, you come back a few days later, you shouldn't see your pins that you presented to us a few days ago. It should be a fresh map again.
So once we submit the feedback that we have and we return, I guess it goes without saying that we won't see what we submitted. So if, yeah, I mean, if we want to have a record of that, we probably should keep our own notes if we
Yeah,
want to
take a screenshot or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So the bigger question, and I don't know if anyone else has this, but I'm thinking of the neighborhood that I live in, which is Home Park, and I'm wondering, okay, are there going to be potentially multiple development patterns inside my neighborhood? In most neighborhoods, will it be typical that, you know, along the corridors, there's going to
Yeah.
be maybe
Totally.
one development pattern, and then in the core, there's going to be another pattern. There may be 4 or 5 potentially.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's why we didn't call them like neighborhood patterns, because they
Okay.
truly are development patterns. And a neighborhood can have multiple development patterns, just like we have, to your point, right? You could look at our future land use. I call them the donuts, right? You got these low density residential, single family, kind of pale yellow, surrounded by the pinks and the other mixed use on the corridors. You see that all over the city. That map will look very much the same.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Any other questions about the survey, or again, please share the survey links. You know, there are there for anyone to use. We do have Spanish and French translation PDFs. So if you have any neighbors that need other languages, we are trying to accommodate people that would rather provide their input in another language other than English. Those surveys will be open till April 30th, and then we'll have another round of surveys as part of our workshop and, you know, future chapters. So please take a look. Please share those surveys with your neighbors, and they really are good points for us to get input.
Nate, I have a question. It's Courtney, but I can't figure out how to raise my hand tonight for some reason.
Oh, I see it raised now. Hello, welcome.
Physical hand. Okay, so as PlanA ambassadors, are you actively tracking the feedback you're getting from NPUs or even just areas of the city more generally than the NPU, so that we know whether or not our efforts are working, or we know, like for instance, in NPUE, which I chaired, there's 11 neighborhoods. Maybe we're getting great responses out of a couple, but not the others, so that we can focus efforts in certain areas.
Yeah, I think we can work on that. I mean, this is only our 6th day or 7th day of open houses in a long 18 months. So we just started. But yeah, we are asking people to leave their NPU or neighborhoods if they know in any of the surveys. At all of our community open houses, we even asked that in our pop-ups. We haven't, if any of you went to or saw the the mayor's state of the city today. I saw that there was a photo of the mayor putting his little sticky dot in his neighborhoods. We have this kind of carrying around this map of a neighborhood map of trying to get people to put their pin their map like a hostile map to let us know where they're coming from. So yeah, we will intend to provide descriptive statistics to like APAB and our quarterly updates, as well as, you know, share that with maybe an update like every month or so to the MPUs, just so we can get so we can all understand, like, all right, what are we doing well? You know, who are we engaging? Where in the city, and like, where are there places in the city that we're just not getting people, and like, what's the case there, and how can we, you know, collaborate or coordinate our efforts there? We really took an equity lens in terms of figuring out where we do pop-up locations to drive people to open houses or drive people to our online surveys. So we do intend to try to be at every, you know, all parts of the city. We hope to hear from every 240, 250 neighborhoods. That would be amazing. But yeah, early on, but yeah, good point, Courtney. We will share as we continue over the several months to help with our outreach.
Thanks. I don't mean to add to your workload. I just mean to be as supportive as possible. So if something's working really well, maybe other people can know about it so they can do it
Yep.
too.
And I'll talk more about our involvement approach, as well as some activities here as we close up. Kathy, I see your hand raised. You got a question?
Yes. How much if neighborhoods have or areas have master plans, are you taking those into account at all? Or at this point, are you just kind of wiping the slate clean and you're just going strictly by who shows up at these open houses and, you know, does the surveys and all that type of stuff?
Yeah, so no, we are definitely taking a review of all adopted small area plans in the past 10 years. And if we see that there are recommendations for land use changes that have not been implemented, we're going to document those. We're going to note those on the draft maps of the development patterns that we present in May and June. So we are definitely taking those into consideration. I also emphasize, you know, we're going back 10 years. If there are neighborhood plans, small area plans, corridor plans, LCI plans, sub-area master plans, Beltline, what have you, that are older than that, but you feel like, you know, your neighborhood organization or your MPU still uses them to make recommendations, please bring them, you know, brainstorm together, maybe using the mapping tool or something else that you all have, and then come as a group to our workshops to make those recommendations, you know, a thing to consider for us. So yes, we are definitely want to hear feedback on adopted small area plans.
Okay, thank you.
Steve, hi.
Kind of maybe to piggyback on that question, as a member of Castleberry Hill, and we kind of have a pretty new board and a lot of new committee members and good engagement. But we were looking at probably need to redo our small area plan, because that is actually, I think our master plan was done in 2000. Is there a place to point to help us get a new one of those submitted, and maybe how to get started on that?
So I'm sorry, I was distracted. So you're asking if a small area plan update is currently going on, how to incorporate that?
No, I definitely know for at least our neighborhood, it definitely is not.
Okay.
I guess the question being, where would we engage and start to work with the city to do so?
Okay. So I've been asked this question a few times. My recommendation is that Castleberry Hill, for instance, your neighborhood, kind of get together as part of the workshop series. You know, please come to our community open houses. Please introduce yourself, you know, learn about development patterns. But those workshops, we will be in 13 MPUs as our host. You know, we're in 12 MPUs this round, we'll be in 13 others. We'll be in all those study areas at least once, if not twice. So, you know, figure out what workshop works best for your group, come as a group, sit as a table, meet with a planner. And if there are things that you all want to recommend, that would be the time to do so. My recommendation is that you don't start a small area plan. There's a few reasons why. One would be like, it would be hard to do, you know, it wouldn't be hard, but it would just add more work for us to translate. So let's say you currently use the current land use designations, character areas, even use the zoning nomenclature. Things are going to change. So I have to translate, we would have to translate that all. The other is, it might be confusing for a lot of people, you know, if they're coming to a meeting about Castleberry Hill Smart Area Plan, and then the next day or next week, they're coming to a comp plan and trying to understand why are there two things going on. So my recommendation is that just hold off. But, you know, brainstorm, collaborate together to come to these workshops, provide written submissions on our drafts when the public review and comment period opens up. But yeah, there will be a small area planning process. You know, one of those updates to the neighborhood planning chapter will be introducing under this administration and our new commissioner an idea or a desire to create more of a systematic small area planning process, not so much an ad hoc planning process when we're kind of doing small area plans based on grant availability or a council person's discretionary funds. So there is going to be recommendation to create a small area planning process where we would take the updated comp plan in 2025 and to do small area plans around the city that would implement the comp plan, implement the new zoning ordinance or the existing zoning ordinance. And if there were things that we just couldn't come to a consensus on during this 5-year update, you know, say there was some areas of the city that had a lot of good feedback, but it just wasn't a group consensus at the neighborhood level or MPU level. Perhaps a small area planning process could help us build more consensus on a development pattern idea. So hopefully that answers your question about that.
Yep, thanks.
Yep.
One thing I'd add to that, Steve, is I think it'd be great for neighborhoods to leverage the fact that the city is, you know, creating websites, having meetings, you know, developing tools to understand these development patterns. And I think it'd be great for neighborhoods who are in your situation to form little working groups in your neighborhood and just say, we're gonna invite people into a working group or you know, neighborhood meetings, and we're gonna all talk about these things. And you know, you could have meetings where you're pulling up this website and you're, you know, telling everyone about the development patterns and everyone can sort of talk about it together. And it's not the same as a small area plan, but it would be a way for you to leverage all the work the city's doing that could facilitate the conversation about land use in your neighborhood. And you could turn that into something of your own internal little engagement process. And then when this is done, you know, you could step back and say, okay, well, do we still want that? And then you could move forward, you know, in a year or so of, you know, pursuing future steps towards creating a small area plan.
Yeah, and that was kind of, I think, the piece that we were trying to look to. Hey, how do we get on board with the efforts that are already going on with what you guys are doing with this, and one, not duplicate things, but also have a chance to put inputs into that? Because like you said, our master plans from 2000, that is really out of date. We were well aware of that, and but we've got a lot of people that want to engage and do that. For example, been to a couple of the open houses already, and those sorts of things. But even things such as parking and all the other pieces that go along the other area down the road, right? So we got to get that comprehensively, at least for us. So when we engage, we get that in one document, and hopefully we just want to follow the principles as it goes by this Plan A, as opposed to doing something that's against what the city's already doing, right? So, but thanks for that. Yep, we'll definitely do it.
Cool. All right. So I'm going to close this out, and then we'll have, you know, plenty of time for more questions if some ideas come up. So can everyone see my screen okay? Great. So we had our kickoff at Greenbrier Mall, February 29th, Leap Day. Great event. We had about 300 people show up. It was more of a networking, kind of socializing, getting people, you know, one of the key things that we're trying to do is just build relationships, build trust in the neighborhoods. And so we felt like having some sort of event like this that brought in a whole bunch of people from all around town to meet each other, we thought it was like an appropriate thing to kick this off. Now we've had our first week of community meetings since then. Last week we had 3 community open houses. We got 4 this week. The next 2 are actually tomorrow. We have a double header tomorrow, one at Buckhead Library and the other one at CT Martin. All these start at 4 o'clock. All of them end at 7:30. Again, you can come as you will for however long you want to be there. We also had 6 pop-ups, 5 different neighborhoods or 5 different NPUs, and 1 university. In fact, Georgia Tech today. We're going to try to be at all the major universities over the next 18 months as part of this planning process. So we've been busy meeting people. We're averaging about 40 to 60 people, 80, 70 people at our open houses, and depending on the pop-up, whether at a coffee shop or a farmer's market, we're going from like 20 engagement points to like 100 or more, depending on where we're at. If anyone has any ideas of pop-up locations, we are trying to be at every NPU. So we're at 12 NPUs for these open houses. We're at 13 different NPUs for our pop-ups. The next time around be the reverse. So yeah, if you guys have any connections or ideas of great pop-ups, grocery stores, farmers markets, we will probably be at MARTA stations later in the year as part of our transportation chapter and collaborating with MARTA and ATL on the comprehensive transportation plan. But any places where people gather, let us know. We're always open to those ideas. So our workshops, like I keep on saying, our workshops are in May and June. So our open houses will continue on this week. We're taking a break because of spring break next week, and then we're back at it for another week and a half in April. We're continuously providing feedback back to the consultant team to help us interpret all this data we're collecting, from the surveys to the open houses to the pop-ups to just written general comments back to us. We'll come in mid-May back to the communities through our workshops. We'll also have a draft of that land use and neighborhood planning chapters. We will close that off in mid-June before Juneteenth, and then we'll be back again, kind of interpreting and writing a second draft in late July, at which point we'll probably start our kind of traditional way of just giving NPU updates at the monthly meetings, a presentation, 3 or 5 minute presentation or whatever we can accommodate at an NPU meeting. And then in the fall, we are going through the process of asking for support of these 2 chapters. We'll do this again, another round of community meetings in the fall. Not sure the format, not sure how many. Probably won't be all 25 NPUs, maybe focusing on the study areas and focusing more on topics as opposed to locations, since those are broader, policies and actions in those other chapters. But we'll come back to the neighborhoods again through that process of presentation and asking for support in 2025. And there'll be multiple drafts of those full, complete updates of the comp plan. And we know, whether it's a full adoption or amendment, however you want to call it in the fall with these 2 land use and neighborhood planning chapters, we know there'll be tweaks to them in 2025 as we finalize the complete comp plan. So we know there'll be some changes on the margins, some of these development pattern ideas or policies in the neighborhood planning chapter, for instance. So our community involvement plan is on our website. We list the goals and the general approach. This is a living document. We work with APAB during the fall to come up with some strategies and approaches. So again, feedback on the involvement process itself is always welcome. So please take a look at that. We are doing a utility mailer for outreach, I think in a month or 2. So any ideas of just getting out there in the neighborhoods beyond social media, word of mouth has been great. Like, I'm hearing people from all different parts of the city, hearing about Greenbrier, hearing about our open houses or pop-ups. So please spread the word through your networks as well. So I think we got pretty much a good gist of it, what the intent is for both the open houses and workshops. You don't have to explain that. Pop-ups are, again, a way to meet people in the neighborhoods, where they gather. Conversations with planners, just want to highlight there. It's an idea that we actually took from other cities that have been doing comp plans, recently doing really good comp plans. You can kind of consider this as like open hours or front desk hours, like my colleagues in OZD, which I used to do. So for instance, me and Catherine will be at a library working remotely on an afternoon. People will know we're there and they can come in and talk to us, kind of have like a consolidated conversation like this to get to know the planning process, introduce themselves to us, feel comfortable coming to an open house or workshop or getting connected with their NPU. So those are in-person meetings at libraries for now, and we have those on our website what days and which hours we're there. We also have virtual options. We have a few evenings that we don't have meetings. And Catherine and I have decided, we could offer 30-minute conversations with a neighborhood planning unit or a neighborhood land use committee, or if there's like a nonprofit organization or something that they just want to kind of learn more about the planning process and how they can engage. We do have some virtual Zoom options in the month of April, and we'll roll out more of those if they do well and people enjoy them and we find them useful in the later months as well. We're also going to try to do some walking tours, mobile tours. We might have 1 or 2 in May as part of Jane Jacobs weekend, Jane Walks, early May. But we are going to think about those mobile tours, maybe for the other chapters, as another way to engage people outside of an open house or a presentation. And again, I mentioned we'll be, the MPU planners should be given, as part of their MPU monthly responsibilities, given updates, or at least let people know that meetings are coming up. But we'll also have more formal presentations as we have drafts out there. I mentioned we had a Comp Plan 101 Neighborhood University course in January. We kind of had a record breaking, I think over 200 people attend that. It is linked on our website at atlantaforall.com. If you want to take a look at that. Education, things like this. We're working on other education materials as we continue over the next several months, using social media and other ways to kind of take snippets, take our FAQs and kind of just reaching people through those outlets, some education material. We mentioned the surveys and mapping tools quite a lot already. And I mentioned, again, we'll have drafts. So right now it looks like a May draft, a late July draft, and then that fall draft that goes through legislation for the land use chapters and the neighborhood planning chapters. We'll have another draft, public review and comment period for the complete comp plan later in the year in early 2025. So there'll be a red line version. That was one thing that was recommended to us previously, kind of provide red line versions of what changed in the new draft. So we will be working on some sort of red line version of the existing comp plan and showing that next to the first draft when we present that during the workshop series. So here is our 12 community open houses, the locations and the various MPUs. We're at all council districts. So again, I mentioned we are at Buckhead Branch Library tomorrow, as well as CT Martin. So please come out. We have another double header on April 15th. We're at MPU F area and the MPU X area. Here's just a visual graphic showing the split of those open houses and workshops, with the open houses being the Miami blue, the teal, and the orange being the workshops. And you can see all this engagement activities at the bottom of our screen at atlantaforall.com. If you scroll down, you can see all those, but you can also click the menu button and you can see where all those engagement activities are. We have pop-ups that we continuously update like every week when we confirm a location. So we have a few of those pop-ups confirmed, but not yet on our website. But yeah, we will have plenty of ways of being out in the neighborhoods beyond just an open house or a workshop. atlantaforall.com, again, is an email or a website. Social media, email, distribution list is growing every week. So we are trying to use all means virtually to get the word out. But again, we are open to ideas of beyond utility mailers, things within reason. We are, as I mentioned, celebrating MPU 50 this year, and so the comp plan process the public process is really being coordinated to celebrate those events and be there at those events as well. Like we were at Public Participation Day a week ago at City Hall. Now we have PlanA ambassadors. PlanA ambassadors are what we are calling people, my colleagues in Department of City Planning, but also various other departments and our implementing partners that got a little bit of training, that are going to be out there at the open houses or pop-ups to facilitate or co-facilitate or just greet people when they come in and when we meet people. So these, we're calling these, my colleagues, PlanA ambassadors during this public process. I have about 100 people that are PlanA ambassadors. We have a goal of having roughly like 6 participants for every 1 PlanA ambassador. at our open houses. So we've been getting like 15 to 25 people, PlanA ambassadors at our open houses, just so people feel like they are able to talk to people, be heard, whether they're with a planner or a colleague at ATL Dot or Watershed or one of the community improvement districts. So yeah, so with this training, you know, we have city PlanA ambassadors, and now we have neighborhood PlanA ambassadors. And for the neighborhood PlanA ambassadors, we really hope you engage in the planning process first and foremost. We also would love for you to raise awareness with your neighbors. You know, assist your neighbors, like Aaron mentioned, you know, assist them with using the survey mapping tool, being comfortable submitting their comments via the survey or a comment on the website, or when we have drafts. You know, please, you know, think about the leadership or the role and responsibility of your NPU or neighborhood organization to organize those comments on the drafts, because again, we are coming to you as planners later in the year. Do you support these updates? And you know, that value of the vote of 25 NPUs, as you all know, is very important for us as planners to get buy-in or support from council members and the mayor. So there has to be some sort of role or responsibility for the NPUs themselves to be some sort of organizing body, a vetting body, a body of building consensus on ideas, as well as just getting feedback from a person that comes to our workshops or drops a comment online or on a survey. But we really do feel like there is a responsibility as a neighborhood ambassador, especially if you're at a neighborhood group or an NPU leadership board, to provide some sort of organizing and coordinating over the next several months. And with that said, there are a lot of NPU policies. You know, the project team has reviewed, Aaron, I think there were like 800 NPU policies in the current Plan A. You know, you don't have to raise your hand, but everyone's familiar that every NPU has a 12 or more policy statements in the comprehensive plan, correct? And that those policies should be referred to when NPUs are making recommendations, whether it's on land use or zoning or any other quality of life decisions. These neighborhood policies have been part of the planning process since the 70s and 80s. It appears like back in those decades that the planning department kind of worked with neighborhoods and NPUs and wrote the policies themselves, the planners, and then they were provided in the planning document. But that practice has gone away, and we've been just asking for NPUs to submit their policies without any type of editorial work on our end. Like they just were put into the document. We are suggesting, and we're going to work over the summer months, figure out a way to, you know, work with those revisions, you know, work revisions with the NPUs, so they align with not only the new nomenclature and where the new zoning ordinance is going, but also Atlanta city design as a framing document, but also thinking about just the consistency between what is a city policy and the chapters versus what are in the NPU policies as an appendix or something easy. We made an appendix so you can easily pull them out and search for your policies so they don't get lost in the shuffle of a multi-hundred page document. So we are going to work on how we facilitate and guide those NPU policy revisions during the summer months and into the fall. So we welcome any suggestions from the NPU chairs, or if you have a committee looking at your NPU policies, we are welcome to suggestions on how to facilitate or guide those revisions this time around. You know, there are NPU policies that were written by planners in the 80s that are still there that have no relevance. Like they are just completely outdated. Like talking about development or the growth of a street that has long passed that. Like there's just some stuff out there that's super old that I would love to work with all the NPUs to kind of clean them up as part of this comp plan update. So that is it on our end. I hope it was useful. I hope you feel like it you know what's going on, the process, the importance of the open houses for introducing development patterns, the importance of workshops to really refine the maps and policy statements, to think about your NPU policies, to think about how you can coordinate and group or organize yourselves with small area plan ideas and bring them into the discussion during the workshops, as well as just, being comfortable being neighborhood ambassadors to spread the word and come to our meetings. So any further comments or suggestions or questions? If not, we'll give you guys 20 more minutes of your evening. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a great night, and I hope to see you all at our upcoming open houses. Thanks.